Welcome back to Tutorials with Jesse here at Podomatic, helping you with all your podcast related things. If you haven't started your podcast yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's easy, it's free, it's here at Podomatic. Now, last video, we made sure to register your podcast and get it set up on Podomatic.com. This video, we're going to be focusing on how to plan for your first episode. What we will be covering. We'll be defining your show from a macro versus micro lens. We'll find out who your audience is and how your show will stand out versus others. We're going to build the show structure by defining how long each episode should be, how often you should record, and the pros and cons of having a co-host. We'll define your segments, populate your segments, and then prepare you to record. So let's go. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of eager beavers out there that are like, can I just skip this part? Yeah, if you feel like you're ready to swim, jump in the water and be on your way. For those that want to be a little bit more organized and a little bit more structured, I suggest we continue. Macro versus micro. What does that mean? So when it comes to defining your show and your audience, simply put, macro is broad, micro is detailed. Sometimes having more niche of a show will get you more audience. What I mean by that is, for example, it would be a broad concept to make a show about sports. You would want to zoom in further and cover a specific sport. So your podcast could be about baseball. The more niche your podcast is, the easier it will be for you to structure a show around that, and also for your audience to follow along. You also want to make yourself stand out amongst a crowded space. So you got to assume in this day and age, everybody has a podcast. At least we suggest you do. Here at Podomatic.com, we believe everyone should have a podcast. But if there's other podcasts about baseball, you want to find out what they're doing so you could sprinkle your own version in it. Defining your show and audience when it comes to who is your audience. It will help you stay focused if you know who you're talking to. Back to our baseball example. If you're going to make a podcast about baseball, you want to assume you're talking to or act like you're talking to a group of baseball fans and put yourself in that environment. Pretend you're at a ball game or even a sports bar talking about baseball. You're going to assume that a large portion of your audience are baseball fans. So talk to them like you would any other baseball fan. However, if you want to make your show that's more acceptable by the public and more generic, then your tone would be something in the middle, addressing all walks of life. It just depends on who you plan to address and what type of content you plan to cover. This will help you when it comes to how you speak to them and what you speak about. Your show versus others out there. What other shows are people listening to in your space? So find out. What type of baseball podcasts are there? How long are they? Do they have co-hosts? Are they solo shows? This way you can find out what's popular. How might your show attract those listeners? So find out what is working. Will your show stand out and offer something different than the rest? How long should each episode be? We find here at Podomatic that the majority of most successful shows are between 20 and 40-minute episodes. Now, some episodes may run longer, some episodes may run shorter. However, it is important to lock down an ideal time frame for each episode. That way, if they run a little shorter or a little longer, you'll know how to wrap it up accordingly. When it comes to a shorter episode, it's okay to cut it once the content is over with. You don't want to have to stretch out your episode and feel like you have to make a 15-minute episode last a whole hour. And as for the longer episodes, it's okay to bookmark it at a certain point and use the rest of the content that you didn't cover for another episode. But you don't need to feel like you have to speed up just to make a certain time frame. Find what will be comfortable for you, and you'll find that over time. And also, it will help, your audience will appreciate having a continuous theme for when it comes to the length of your episodes, because they'll get accustomed on not only how to listen to you, but for how long. You could always try it out and see what works best. When it comes to how often you should record, this is one of the most important factors to your podcast success. If you record too often, for example, daily, It'll be hard for you to keep up, and your audience as well will feel overwhelmed. However, if you don't record enough and you're recording too infrequently, your audience may fall off or go to a similar show in your space. When it comes to season versus episodic, is your content a story? Does the information progress over time? For example, that would be a seasonal show. A good example would be if you made a podcast about boxing and you were covering the life of Mike Tyson. The early episodes would be covering his childhood all the way to the championship boxing years. That would be a seasonal show. Does the content change from week to week? That's going to be an episodic show. Back to our boxing example, if you had an episodic boxing show, one episode may be about Mike Tyson, and the next episode may be about Floyd Money Mayweather. So when it comes to having a co-host, there's definitely pros and cons. Co-hosts are great, and they provide you more of a dynamic to your show. There's a lot of energy that can be bounced back and forth between co-hosts. There could be humor dynamic. There could be the odd couple dynamic. It creates more emotion throughout the content that's being presented. When it comes to solo shows, they sometimes can sound repetitive, monotone, but they also can have their pros. Sometimes working with a co-host can get in the way of things. Sometimes your schedule does not add up. Your lifestyles could be different. You could have a co-host that has a wife and kids, or a husband and kids, and you are single with no kids, and they only have a specific day and time that they could fit in, and that doesn't work with you. There could be conflict issues. Sometimes your co-host may not see the vision that you have, and will have podcast fatigue, and there's many variables that could take place when trying to connect with a co-host. So there are pros and cons, and you just have to find what works for you. You're not stuck with one or the other. You could always have a couple episodes that have a co-host, and some episodes you go solo. Usually the type of content will dictate if you need a guest or not, or a co-host. When it comes to episode segments, you could have a basic, what I like to call napkin script, from 3 little lines, an intro, discussing the content, and closing the episode, all the way to 7 segments, as you can see on the right. We feel at Podomatic having a template like this that you can rinse and repeat with the content you plan to cover on the next episode will help you stay structured, and it'll give your audience an idea and an understanding on how to listen to your podcast. When it comes to your intro and your closing, you want to keep it rather same, something that you could repeat each episode. It creates a branding dynamic to your show. When it comes to the intro, you simply want to welcome the audience, introduce the content, and get rolling. When it comes to the closing, you can thank the audience, wrap up the episode, and preview the next episode's content. If it's an episode with a guest, you can welcome the guest and preview if the guest will be on this episode or maybe an upcoming episode. And as your audience grows, and so does your content and the episodes, you can start to include a Q&A section, which will have you interact with your audience members, maybe through social media channels or directly. So when it comes to an episode plan, we suggest having something like this written out or printed out in front of you for when you're ready to record. It'll be a reference. Now, you don't want to be over-scripted, trying to read word for word. However, this will be important for you to have a structure on how to start your show, how to flow, and how to wrap up. So, you're ready to do this. I know you are. But there's a couple things to remember before you start recording. Have fun. Being your authentic self is super important. I know you've heard the term fake it till you make it. That doesn't exist in the podcast world. The audience wants authentic, and they can sense when you're being fake. So be real with your audience, and your audience will be real with you. This is your podcast. You set the rules. We just have suggestions here at Podomatic, but you drive the car. You decide the podcast length, the show structure. You decide. Don't be overly scripted. It's good to have a script, and it's important to have a template. However, reference it. Don't stick to it word for word. And above all else, it gets better over time. Most podcasters find their voice within their 6th to 9th episode, if not more. We're here to help at Podomatic throughout your podcast journey, And I'm here if you have any questions or concerns. I ask you to contact me at jesse@podomatic.com with all your questions, comments, and content. I look forward to helping you with the next video as we help you record your first episode. Once again, I'm Jesse with Podomatic. If you haven't started your podcast yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's easy, it's free, it's here at Podomatic.com.